Where to start with this? I'll start with that I have been a fan of the Sandman Comics for a couple of years now. I've read up to volume 7 in the graphic novels, and I've enjoyed each volume immensely, especially Season of Mist, which I hope to see adapted in the future, as it is a very engaging story arc revolving around Dream's past. From Neil Gaiman's writing to the art styles in the various issues, it all works for me greatly. Dream has always been a personal favorite comic book character of mine, as well as Death, after reading some of these stories. The DC Comics series has around a total of 75 issues and has been reprinted numerous times and has won even more awards, deservedly so. But how does this Netflix adaptation hold up to the comics? I think this may be the best live-action comic book adaptation we have gotten so far, or at least from what I've seen. It follows the source material pretty closely. Yes, there are some minor changes and some changes that help the story flow and be a little more cohesive. The show reins it down a bit and keeps it where it's a little more easy to follow and digest. I always held the live-action Watchmen film as a pretty solid adaptation of the graphic novel, aside from changing the ending a bit and, well, sometimes missing the point of the story. I think especially for its time, it was a pretty great accomplishment, and one of my favorite Zack Snyder films, honestly. That said, the Sandman series delivers in almost all areas for me personally. From casting to the musical score, and the overall visuals just really work, and you can tell Netflix wasn't stingy with the budget, thankfully. I definitely think this is easily the best live-action adaptation of a DC comic book we have gotten so far. So I really want to talk about the positives now. And the first thing that really sticks out is the casting choices for Dream and the Corinthian. I don't think you could have picked better actors for these roles. They both embody the characters so well and definitely have the right visual vibe for both characters. We don't get a lot of scenes for characters such as Death, Desire, or Despair yet, but from what I saw, they all did a pretty wonderful job. Maybe Death could be a little more perky like in the comics, but this is just a minor gripe and she still puts in a great performance and has me sold on the character. Also, I just want to point out Dream's voice is perfect in this. From now on, that's most likely how I will hear the voice as I read the graphic novels. Another huge positive for this series is just how well they directly adapted the stories to live action. I love that the show uses so much of the dialogue from the comics with minimal to no changes to it. Episode 6 is easily my favorite, which is titled The Sound of Her Wings. I was absolutely astonished how well everything was adapted. It's also always been one of my favorite issues from the comics. FYI, I haven't picked up the comic in years, but recalled so much of the dialogue as I watched it. I've actually started rereading the comics since finishing the series, with full intentions of finishing it this time, and it's amazing all the little details I had forgotten that are in the TV series. I can't praise this series enough for this. Another thing I loved is the special effects, set designs, costumes, and CGI. They are all pretty spectacular in this. As I said earlier, it definitely had a decent sized budget and it paid off. There may have been one or two instances where it seemed a little obvious it was green screen, but that is far and few in between. I kind of wish they made Dream and Death have a little bit more of an otherworldly or godly look to them, but that's okay. I vaguely remember seeing an article about how they tried to give Dream his black eyes and pale skin, but it didn't quite look right. Oh well, at least they thought about it, I guess. The musical score also bodes really well with the series. I don't remember a real standout track, but I do think it captured the vibe and atmosphere needed for the series. I don't remember hearing anything, let's say like Michael Giacchino's The Batman theme, where it automatically gets you hyped. But I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing for the Sandman. Dream's theme is pretty wonderful though. I'll have to explore the soundtrack a little bit more over time and see if I missed anything truly epic like that. I also like the little Easter eggs showing this is a DC Comics property. We see Jed has action figures of the Flash and Wonder Woman, and we also see him watching Static Shock and the Justice League animated series. Those were the two I noticed on my first watch though. There could be more that I missed, and if I did, you can comment down below and let me know what I missed. And another very positive thing here is Netflix got Neil Gaiman directly involved with the show, And I think that is always a huge plus when you can get the actual creators of the property to be involved with the series. They have him listed as a developer and producer on it. I think this really went a long way with making the series such a faithful adaptation. I mentioned Watchmen earlier as a pretty solid adaptation, but can you imagine if Alan Moore would have had a similar role with Zack Snyder while filming Watchmen? I know that was never a possibility, as Alan Moore has never been interested in his comics being movies, as well as DC burning bridges with him, but we can dream about it, can't we? At least Dave Gibbons was very supportive of the film. Anyways, one thing I pointed out earlier was the changes to the series, and I want to discuss what Neil Gaiman said about them. He said that he wanted to update some things as he would have written them in current times, which I can see his point of view for that. It is his work, he's allowed to make changes to it. Just like George Lucas did when he updated the original trilogy of Star Wars. Will everyone like these changes? No. I will say I think they mostly work for the Sandman though. I would have loved to have John Constantine in this series, but I can understand their possible reasons not to include him, as he has become a more well-known name in the DC universe. The first few issues of the Sandman comics had Martian Manhunter, Scarecrow, Arkham Asylum, and so on that showed it was infused in the DC Comics universe. After, I want to say, like issue 7, any mention of the DC universe kinda dissolves, at least from what I have read personally. The story becomes its own thing, so I can understand not weighing the new TV series down with any real connections to the DC universe. It makes sense and I can respect their decision to leave it out completely, even as a big DC fanboy. I'm just guessing that as the reason. Maybe they did want to use them but had restrictions on being able to use certain characters, which is another possibility, as we have seen that happen before with prior TV series and movies. In closing, I will say I am very curious how people who have never read the comics will like this series. So far, it looks like it's mostly positive, which makes me happy, as I hope to see a few more seasons of this series. I would love to see Season of Mist adapted. Dream and Nada's story was always a standout. Will they adapt the Dream as a Cat story? That would be interesting. There's still plenty of amazing stories to adapt from this legendary DC comic run. Hopefully by the time season 2 comes out, I'll have finished all the comics. That's my plan anyways. I will say if you're a superhero fan, but want something a bit more challenging and very different, maybe not so action heavy and leans into more mythology and the supernatural, this is a series for you.